Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are connecting from in the world, and a very, very warm welcome to this landmark event. I'm talking about the official launch of the Pan-African Justice Initiative, or PAJI. My name is Nozi Poshabalala, and it is an absolute privilege to be with you today. And I see Matt Beers, one of our panelists, is already applauding, so you can join him because this is a very special moment for all of us. Let me just take a second just to remind all of us, what is PAJI all about? What do we mean when we're talking about the Pan-African Justice Initiative? We're talking about a nonprofit that is committed to advancing justice, integrity, and accountability, and to do this across the African continent. Some of the modalities or the pathways that we're going to hear about in this webinar today is that they do this through skills development, through capacity building, and cross-border collaboration, which is a huge reflection of the conversation that we are about to have. Before I get into it, I do want to take a little bit of time just to set up the housekeeping rules so that we are all having the best optimized experience as possible. First and foremost, this is a conversation. This is not 90 minutes of us talking at you. So I'm extending an explicit invitation to say, please make use of the chat. I want to see your questions, your comments, even a shout out. We'd love to know which country are you joining us from, which association or organization are you affiliated with, so that we can really get a good feel for this global conversation that we're having here today. So please go ahead. If you haven't already, drop it in the chat. I'll do some shout outs in a moment, but let us know where you are joining us from. I do also want to invite you to help us amplify the message beyond the screen where you may be. We'd really love to get this message out. And so you can share some of your thoughts and your comments on Instagram stories using the hashtag Pan-African Justice. And of course, you can mention us at the following 3 handles. On Instagram, we are at Pan-African Justice Initiative. On our Facebook page, we are the Pan-African Justice Initiative. And of course, on YouTube, it is exactly the same. And what we are looking for is to hear so much more from you. I can see already that there are already questions that have popped in. Alice Brown says, I'm here. I'm sending greetings from Johannesburg. And I'd love to see a few more people who are joining us. I know we're close to 100 and counting as we go, and I'm sure that the number is going to keep rising. My first order of business here from Johannesburg today is to really welcome you, but also to invite the executive director of PAJI to really extend the official welcoming remarks. Now, the person who I'm about to invite is the visionary really behind the Pan-African Justice Initiative. She's a Harvard-educated attorney, a Fulbright scholar, a member of the California State Bar with over 20 years of international legal leadership. Her career can be best described as a roadmap of impact. And so it gives me such a great pleasure to welcome Kim Robinson to take to the floor and really extend her official welcoming remarks to us. Kim, over to you.
Nosy, thank you so much for that introduction. Everyone, good evening, good afternoon, good morning. Wherever you are, whatever the time, welcome. My greeting reflects the global nature of the Pan-African Justice Initiative. We are registered in South Africa, Kenya, and the US, and we have representatives in Malawi and Ghana and an advisor in Canada. As Executive Director of PAJI here in South Africa, it is my pleasure to welcome you to this webinar, which is the official launch of PAJI. This webinar on GBV, cybercrime, and human trafficking is PAJI's inaugural event, and it is an example of what PAJI does and how PAJI does it. We seek to improve the ability of criminal justice institutions across Africa to fight transnational crime. We host skills building opportunities such as workshops. We convene networking and relationship building events. We raise public awareness. In these interventions, we bring criminal justice practitioners from across Africa and across the globe together to share best practice and next practice. We enable them to get to know each other. We do this in person and remotely. You'll find a sample of the courses PAJI offers through our course catalog on the PAJI website. We can also customize courses to meet the unique needs of our stakeholders. Today's webinar exemplifies the PAJI way. Today, we're initiating a conversation on an important topic that includes perspectives from South Africa, Kenya, and the US. And significantly, as Nosy said, the conversation will include your perspectives, the perspectives of the online audience. We ask you as online delegates to engage actively on the chat with comments and questions. Again, welcome to the official inaugural event of PAJI. I hope that you find this official launch educational and inspirational. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Kim. Thank you for that really wonderful welcome. We certainly feel welcomed, and thank you for acknowledging, of course, that this is a global conversation. I also have a shout out that's come from Noma Uhuru, who says, I'm here. I am from Tosinga, Baninga, and I'm based in the Val. And so I want to keep encouraging all of those who are joined. Please let us know where you are. We would really love to connect with you. I do also want to underscore just for a second there, the course catalog that Kim has made mention of. It is one of the things that we are inviting you to go and intentionally look for on the PAJI website. And towards the end, we will be repeating some of those catalog options that are at your disposal. As we get ready for the conversation, let me take just a few seconds to set the scene. Here, we know that in the time that it will finish, it will take us to get through the webinar of about 90 minutes. In that time, stats also tell us that another life will be impacted by GBV in South Africa. And this is why this conversational space is so important. And we can't just talk. Our conversation has to have a bias towards action. We also know that if we look outside of South Africa and we look in the EU as an example, research has been done by UN Women that shows that together with the EU Parliament, that women are 27 times more likely to be harassed online than men. And here's another stat for you. 1 in 10 women in the EU alone has already experienced some form of cyber violence since the age of 15. And that's just one region of the world. And so what we're hearing and seeing from this data and these trends is that GBV, cybercrime, and human trafficking are not separate crises. These are not separate issues. In fact, they are very, very much interconnected. And increasingly, and this is where the kicker comes in, technology is both the weapon and the weapons reach. And a huge part of this conversation is going to be today about bringing to light and surfacing some of that. And so some of you in this session, I know, might know survivors, and some of you may be survivors yourself. So we're holding this conversation with that consciousness and that awareness in mind as well. I want to transition to welcoming my panelists and giving them an opportunity to tell us a little bit about themselves. But what I do want to say that we are exceptionally fortunate to have practitioners who not only operate at the theoretical level as theoretical experts, but these are men and women who are on the field every day actually doing the work. So the insights that we're going to be hearing are very practical and grounded in their realities. I'm going to invite Vuyoka Ziketelo first, who represents the National Prosecuting Authority of South Africa, to introduce yourself briefly, Vuyo, but also tell us a little bit about the role you play in addressing GBV, cybercrime, and human trafficking.
Thank you very much, Nosy, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to the listeners, depending where they are listening from. My name is Vuyoka Ziketelo. I'm a senior state advocate within the National Prosecuting Authority of South Africa. I'm responsible for the management of GBV, cybercrime within the NPA, and also I'm responsible for training prosecutors on how to effectively and efficiently manage GBV cases. And also I'm responsible for what we call the Tutuzela care centers, which ensures that every victim of GBV is at the center of the services that we are offering.
I'm going to move on now from South Africa. I'm going to move north of the continent, but northeast in particular, as I make my way to Evelyn Mboya, who is the superintendent of police based out in Mombasa in Kenya. To introduce yourself, please, Eva, and to speak a little bit about the role that you play in addressing GBV, cybercrime, and human trafficking.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity once again. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm happy to be here. My main role is to protect the most vulnerable, who are the children. And there are some instances on special occasions, we also protect women and even men. because GBV encompasses both. So ours basically is to proactively prevent, protect the most vulnerable against violence, and at the same time respond by investigating these kind of crimes, cybercrime, human trafficking, and GBV related cases comprehensively and exhaustively. And at the same time, being a specialized unit, we offer a lot of training to colleagues in the law enforcement and even to our other actors, justice actors, that's the prosecution and even the judiciary, where necessary. As I've said, being a specialized unit again, with the emerging crimes, we were the first one to be able to be enlightened on online crimes against children. For instance, we call it OXEA, which is online child sexual exploitation and abuse.
Eva, thank you so much. And what I particularly love about that introduction is that you're already showing the power behind specialized units and the extent to which it gives you the agility and the pace to move ahead so that you then share that information and learning with other bodies and organizations as well. And so that training sharing element is coming through so strongly. And I don't doubt it's a thread we might hear a little bit more of in this conversation. Let me make my way over now across the seas to the US. And I'm going to go to Matt first. Just Matt, so that I don't leave you at the end as the only man on the panel. I'm going to ensconce you into this conversation. And Matt Beers is a digital forensics examiner out of Colorado in the US. Thank you very much for being up and joining us on this call. Tell us a little bit about the role you play in this intersection of GBV, cybercrime, and human trafficking.
Sure. Thanks, Nosy. And thank you, PAJI, for having me. I'm really excited to be here for this inaugural event. I'm Matt Beers. Again, I'm a digital forensic examiner and an investigator out of Boulder, Colorado. We're kind of at the foothills of the Rocky Mountains. I do digital forensics on basically anything that can contain data. So if it's a computer, a hard drive, a cell phone, a camera, even IoT devices that we're seeing connect, anything that connects to the internet. I try to pull data from that. In addition to being specialized in digital forensics, I teach digital forensics to practitioners across the world. So my unit goes out very often and conducts search warrants on suspect residences and businesses to protect, again, the most vulnerable, as Eva said. So we're really working towards digital forensics and the creative ways that data is being hidden and the way that data is just surrounding us with every type of device that everybody has, as well as actively going after the people that are abusing our kids online.
It makes quite a lot of sense why I got so many nods from you as Eva was speaking. That alignment is coming through in terms of the focus on children as part of the most vulnerable members of our community, but also as you speak about looking at some of those digital trends and how quickly they may enable crimes. One is reminded of the significance of speed and being able to move ahead of some of these developments. And so we look forward to hearing from you. Adrian Van Nuys, so lovely to have you also coming out of Colorado this morning, I believe, on your side of the world. Please introduce yourself and let us know what your world looks like and your role in this conversation of addressing GBV, cybercrime, and human trafficking.
Absolutely. Thank you, Nosy. And thank you so much for allowing myself and Matt to be part of this presentation and this conversation. I am the Chief Trial Deputy who supervises the sexual assault and human trafficking units in the Boulder County District Attorney's Office, which is also known as the Office for the 20th Judicial District Attorney here in the state of Colorado. We have 23 judicial districts just within our state alone. In terms of the intersection of my work with gender-based violence, cybercrime, and human trafficking, obviously to a certain extent that's encompassed in the title. But what we're doing in terms of my unit, what I'm doing in terms of my work is working with law enforcement agencies, both within my jurisdiction and outside of my jurisdiction, to assist in helping to direct investigation into offenses that involve sexual violence, offenses that involve gender-based violence, that involve human trafficking, and of course, in this day and age, that almost always involves the use of the internet or electronics. So it's really sort of intermeshed at all times with this concept of cybercrime as it's growing. I additionally do training with our Ending Violence Against Women's program here in Colorado with our National District Attorneys Association nationally, and occasionally am lucky enough to be invited to participate in things like this to speak to an international audience about these issues of gender-based violence, and training on these concepts of how do we investigate them, how do we prosecute them, how do we work together to really address these issues, because while sometimes it's easy to become siloed in our domestic focus in our own jurisdictions, these issues are so much broader and global as we can see today, and working together to solve some of these issues, I think, is a real passion. So again, just so grateful to be here this morning, afternoon, evening.
During this day. Adrian, thank you very much, because I think one of the things you've now brought to the surface for us is this idea of working beyond one's own jurisdiction. And as you talk about the emphasis on collaborating and working with other organizations, this certainly is one of those moments where we are collaborating in the conversation, but hopefully looking for ways to collaborate even more. I do want us just to spend a little bit of time teasing out some of the regional nuances as they show up. And perhaps let me first come to you, Eva. What I'm really wanting you to do is perhaps just describe for me what cybercrime in your region looks like. What is it about the East African or Kenyan region that you're seeing as trends that might be different to other parts of the world? It would be interesting to juxtaposition that against maybe South Africa, Vuyo, so I'll come to you with that. And maybe, Adrian, I'll come to you to give us the US perspective. But let me start in Kenya. Regional nuances, Eva, that you can share with us?
In the East African perspective, we are actually seeing a lot of trends that comes along with it. And we are seeing that there is a lot of linkage between the GBV and human trafficking. As a country, and I believe the rest of East Africa community, we have some laws that addresses, that speaks to this kind of trends that we are actually witnessing to date. So basically, cybercrime is simply these activities that are committed by use of computers, or rather digital devices. And how are they linked? What we are seeing in the region is that there is a lot of non-consensual sharing of intimate images. That is very common. And at the same time, we are also seeing online threats and intimidations. That is with the GBV. And again, we are also seeing a lot of online harassment and cyber stalking. And also, we are seeing that the young people, especially women and girls, they are being targeted through cyberbullying. Now, when it comes to human trafficking, what we are seeing within the region is the recruitment. We are also seeing the movement, money movement, using the banking platforms. And the most evident now and the most prominent is cryptocurrency. And we are also seeing coordinated cross-border movement discreetly. So basically, what does it look like? It looks like, number one, we are seeing a lot of social media exploitation. Social media exploitation through those fake jobs, through the romance scams. We have a lot of dating sites here. And sometimes there is this notion that I might be lucky and get someone, and by the end of the day, other things happen. Yeah. So there is also online grooming with social media exploitations. And the next thing that we are also seeing is the mobile money and digital platforms.
Yeah.
Fraudulent recruitments, we are seeing financial exploitation of victims, and we are also seeing anonymous transfer. Then the third thing that we are seeing is online sextortion. We see a lot of young people, we see a lot of women, they are being coerced into sending intimate or rather obscene images of themselves for exchange. So they are being blackmailed and all that. And we are also seeing a lot of threats that comes along with that. So the last more thing that we are seeing is online radical grooming. A lot of our children are finding themselves very vulnerable and so much exposed by exposure of the internet. So they are found in the cyberspace, and that is how they suffer the consequences.
Eva, thank you so much. Because what I'd like to do, because we're really trying to paint a tapestry of difference at the moment, and maybe Vuyo, there are some things that Eva might have mentioned that are perhaps already or are similar in the South African context, as she speaks about this idea of, poaching based on economic vulnerabilities, where people are targeted through social media on the promise of jobs. I would imagine that probably is true in the South African context as well. But bring us very briefly into the South African reality. How does it differ or stand out relative to what we've just heard from Eva describing out of Kenya?
As Eva was explaining, in South Africa, cybercrime increasingly involves, the use of digital platforms such as your social media, your Facebook pages, messaging apps, and online marketplaces to commit fraud, amongst other things, to harassment, identity theft, and online exploitation. And when criminals are doing these acts, they often use anonymity. They do not want you to know who they are. They also use fake profiles. They might say that this is Vuyo, whom you think you are speaking to, whereas it's somebody else. And they also use encrypted platforms to target victims. And I also want to say, Nozi and listeners, that there is a really strong connection between cybercrime, gender-based violence, and human trafficking. Why do I say that? Because technology is frequently used to groom, as Nozi was saying, to recruit, to control, and to exploit victims. For example, traffickers may approach, vulnerable individuals, online with false job opportunities or romantic relationship, because what people tend to do in these social medias, they will be writing things like, I need help, get me appointment. That is an opportunity that these criminals are using thereof. And I also want to say that how does then that connectivity is linked, to gender-based violence, because it includes harassment. In a way, you are also harassed when they do this, and there are also elements of non-consensual sharing of intimate images. So what they will do to you, what you are seeing in South Africa, is that they will pretend as if they are this person, and while they are trying to help you because you are vulnerable, they will be telling you that share your images. While they do that, they are also sharing your images somewhere else. In some instances, they even say, because they are saying that they are in love with you, something like that, they want to enter into a relationship with you, also share your nude images. In that way, we see issues of pornography that are also coming in, here. So that there is also forms of abuse that we are seeing when we are looking at cybercrime, gender-based violence, and human trafficking. And having said that, Nozi, cybercrime acts are both, a tool and enabler to GBV and human trafficking, making digital safety awareness, stronger cybercrime enforcement, critical components of prevention and victim protection in South Africa. So you can tell already that there are similarities.
I see a lot of reinforcement of how sometimes that connectivity can translate into a vulnerability, like you say, in the absence of awareness and safety awareness that comes through. I think one of the things that Eva said that is just ringing at the back of my mind is thinking about how the use of mobile money platforms, which is one of the strengths of the region, has become actually one of the exploitation or exploitative methods in which victims are targeted, which is really, really, really interesting. I want to go to Adrian just to bring us into the US now. And again, Adrian, what I'm really looking forward to your response here is any nuances that are either fundamentally different from what we're hearing coming out of the African experience or quite unique to the US that you would like to add to this conversation.
You know, Nosy, I think that's a really difficult question, right? Because I think what you pointed out at the very beginning of this particular presentation is this concept that the internet is now the weapon and the reach, and the global nature of these organizations, the global nature of this victimization, the reach of individuals makes it so that oftentimes I think these investigations look very similarly, and some of the challenges that are facing us internationally are very similar. And it's difficult to say how things are different in one region from another, because an individual who is perpetrating in my jurisdiction may also be perpetrating in yours. Oftentimes these global networks have, you know, their connection is like a spider web, you know, a connection to Kenya, a connection to South Africa, a connection to Laos, a connection to Colorado. It's quite broad. I think one of the topics that I haven't heard talked about really so far this morning is really the use of the internet and the use of the interconnectedness now as our marketplace. And I think that there was some reference to that a little bit earlier, but everything that used to be on the street is now online. And the use of these platforms, not only to lure people in, not only to bring in additional victims, but also to market their servitude, if you will, or to market their exploitation through the form of child sexually exploitative material, or what we would call here revenge porn, which is what's been referenced, you know, sort of the exploitation of private images or the distribution of private images. So I think it's, as I said, I think it's difficult to say that there's something that's specifically unique in the US because these organizations are not unique to our region or to your region. They are operating everywhere all the time.
I think that's a really good point, because it reinforces again Eva and Rio's point around the coordinated cross-border nature of these activities. And that makes a really, really good point there. But also the point about the marketplace, Adrian, to say that there is this a thriving marketplace that is enabled by the digital interconnectivity. Matt, I'm not leaving you out. I'm going to circle back to you. What I'd love to do is I want to just highlight just two things. I want us to launch a poll very quickly, where we get everybody who's actually online to maybe put on the hat of their own community and to ask and to respond to the question, which cyber threat do you believe is most prevalent in your community today? And this question is really geared to allow us to get a sense of when we then really take this from an audience perspective, a global perspective, what does that actually look like? So that poll is up. I can see it in the on my screen, and I'm seeing a note that says, Nosy, you're a panelist, you cannot participate in the poll. So there I was trying to click away. And while I wait for the results to come through, I do want to just quickly highlight some of the people that have joined and have shouted out to us. We have representatives from Tanzania, from Vienna, from Cape Town. We have a range of different organizations, including medical forensics, advocates, other attorney groups. So I just want to say thank you very much for being here. And I see your shout outs, letting us know where you are and the range of different organizations that are being shouted out. Interestingly, we're seeing all of the above at more than half of everybody who's actually participated. And again, Adrian, I think this would really reinforce the point that you are making around that interconnection. About 25% on online harassment and cyber, GBV, as well as identity theft and financial fraud. And we're seeing a smaller percentage focusing on digital grooming and trafficking. Let me first land the stat. The stat tells us that according to the International Labour Organization, as well as the UN Office on Drugs and Crime, human trafficking is a $150 billion global industry, to the point that Adrian makes about the marketplace, with over 70% of detected victims being women and girls. Again, a thread that we've heard. If we bring it closer to Africa, we see that the majority of trafficking is for forced labor and for sexual exploitation. The question that I want to bring to you, Matt, is this. As someone who works at this intersection of crime and technology, what are you seeing as the biggest challenges to successful prosecution when it comes to digital evidence?
The hardest thing that I've seen is agencies and departments. One, they're not communicating together. They're not talking to each other to look at trends, to work together, to help each other thrive. They're keeping that information in-house and sheltered. And then the other side of things is, for me to investigate technology at the level that I do is very expensive. It costs a lot of money for the training that we have to go through. It costs a lot of money for the computers that we have to use. It costs a lot of money for the software that we have to renew every year, and to keep up to date with the current trends. Everything I know about digital forensics tomorrow with an update on a phone completely change everything I know, and I won't be able to view any of the data anymore in traditional means, right? Yeah. So having the funding and having the communication and knowing who your partners and resources are, I think is the hardest thing that I'm seeing. We're not seeing that collaboration. Yeah. Once you start to put those together in that collaboration, kind of like what we're having here, we're talking, we're networking here, we're building this collaboration as I talk to help when I have an issue where I might have to reach out to someone in South Africa relating to a case. I'm able to do so now. And getting over the hurdle of holding on to information versus sharing information is a big thing. A lot of people don't like to give up what they know. And all I want to do is to help out other people. So I will give you all the information I can. I will help develop custom things for other agencies just so we can progress further. So even if my agency didn't have the technology, at least I would have the resources then to reach out to a partner agency to get help.
Matt, I was going to go exactly there to say that how do you actually get over that barrier? Because one would imagine that information is the highest asset that each of these organizations believe that they have in the fight. And so the openness with information is few. But maybe let me put the question a little bit differently. I want to maybe focus on the resources element of what you've shared with us. When we look at communities with even fewer resources, right, than those who do have, what does the true cost look like for protection for these kinds of crimes? And what options do people realistically have? Because when you start, if we double click on the question of resources, it is a much deeper conversation that we are being invited to have.
Well, I think you're right there. And what it comes down to is administration and people at a higher level than maybe just investigators. Is what kind of dedication or commitment are they going to provide and support are they going to provide to their staff to be able to investigate these? And that's where that resource question comes in. It's much deeper than that. So if I have an administrator that supports it, they're going to also further support it financially in getting those resources, or support me going to a training or a conference where I can network and I can start to build those relationships. I've worked with agencies that don't want to do any type of child exploitation investigations, because that means that if they do that, they'll see that those predators are in their community. Right now, they turn a blind eye to it and those predators don't exist. The moment you start hunting those predators, they suddenly exist.
Yeah, so there are architectural issues, organizational, administrative conversations that we need to have simultaneously. But let's build on some of Matt's insights as he talks to us around on the question of resources. And I want to launch the next poll, please, team. How aware are you of services or resources available to victims of these crimes? I am aware and I know how to access these, access support for these crimes? Or is it B, that I am aware, but I've never had to use any of these support services or access them in any way? Or C, is it I'm not aware at all, and I actually would not know where to go for support? Because I think this gives us a little bit of a reading on that question of how accessible are the resources, how proximate are they to those who need them the most, and how interesting that the vast majority of the people on the saying, I'm not aware at all, and I wouldn't know where to go for support. And that's quite sobering. Again, thinking about the caliber of organizations and people who have joined us on the call at 42%. At 33%, I am aware, but I've never had to use these support services. And of course, I am aware and I know how to access, being just about a quarter of the people online. And therein, I think the mission for PAJI is so clear about how do we do the work that raises that awareness. Eva, let me come back to you, because while I've really appreciated Matt speaking to us about some of the challenges, it's equally important for us to talk about the successes as well. And you've had some real success in your field. And the question I want to bring to you is, what are the factors that have made the biggest difference in your unit's ability to address GBV, cybercrime, and human trafficking?
I can say that in East Africa, what we've been able to witness is that majority of, especially Kenyans, they are willing to give you the information, but they don't want to report. They don't want to witness to that information that they've given you. So one of the biggest success we've come up with is enhanced reporting. So we've been able to encourage anonymous calling, where we have the free toll lines, where they are able to report anonymously, and that is it. We take up the information and act on it. And secondly, because we've realized that people shy away from these kind of cases, of course, they are shaming in a way, we've been able to embrace survivor-centered kind of approach, whereby we are mainly focused, our priority is to ensure that the victim has confidence, the victim is safe, and we also prioritize on the dignity of the victim. So we do a lot of survivor-centered. And then the third thing that we've seen taking us all the way to victory is we've embraced multi-agency collaboration.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because we've realized that on our own as investigators, we can't do it. We must bring along all these other stakeholders. We bring the hospitals, we bring the social workers, we bring the advocates, we bring the internet service providers. So a lot of collaboration is going on for success in any and every particular case. We have also seen evidence enhanced kind of investigation in terms of evidence-based investigations. As we've said that cybercrime is a link between GBV and human trafficking. So we see a lot of digital evidence when it comes to this kind of cases. So we've been able to enhance our levels of investigations such that we target the evidence.
Yeah.
So as to secure conviction. The next thing, we do a lot of capacity building, continuous training amongst ourselves, to our colleagues at the police stations who are actually the first responders, and even within the justice system.
I just want to take a moment to read a comment that's caught me in the chat. It comes from Chinga Govati, and Chinga says, it's quite sobering indeed that the majority of service providers are not aware of where to get services. Remember that was 25% on that previous poll. We need a strategy against this. And I'm wondering if it is because services do not exist at all, or if they do, only few are aware of where to access them. We may also need to review service provision strategies. It may no longer be the traditional services we are aware of, and we might need new tailored interventions. I just thought to bring that to the surface because that is quite a startling outcome of that poll. But, Eva, as I'm listening to you sort of share with us some of the factors or variables that have led to success, one of the first things you touched on was this idea of public engagement or engaging the public. And you talk about encouraging, that anonymity in terms of reporting and that anonymous line. And so, Vuyo, I want to build on that a little bit and ask you whether from a prosecution standpoint, how can the public be better engaged to really strengthen the NPA's ability to fight not only domestic crime, but transnational crime as well?
Public engagement is critical to strengthen the fight against transnational crimes, as you are saying that. So our institutions like the NPA, we do not only rely, on law enforcement investigations, but also on informed and vigilant communities. What do I mean about that? We also rely on communities to report these crimes, to the South African police services, because in many instances they are the first ones, to have, experience of these crimes. So we will really also rely on them. As a result of that, many of our pieces of legislation, they've made it mandatory for groups of persons to really report these crimes as and when they happen. For example, doctors, as and when they see a victim of gender-based violence, in the form of consultation, and when they land or they have a reasonable belief or suspicion that gender-based violence has been committed to this particular victim, in terms of the law, they have an obligation to report that. So pieces of legislation, they have that. Even our human trafficking piece of legislation, they have that. Even our Older Persons Act, they have that. Even the Children's Act, they have that, to say that group of people, they need to come in, and report these crimes as and when they are happening. Having said that, beyond reporting crimes, meaningful public participation includes improving digital awareness as well, because today we're also talking about cyber crimes and prevention. So how do we do that? So what we've engaged on is a robust awareness campaign, because you cannot expect communities to come and report crimes when they do not know that they have an obligation to do that. And you cannot expect them to come and report these crimes when they don't even know what do you mean about GBV. So that is what we do as well. We go out there and teach them. If something like this is happening, you must know that is abuse. If something like this is happening, you must know that, it's harassment. So that is how we are utilizing our communities. So organizations like non-governmental organizations as well, they play a major role, and we are also depending on them as we do that.
I think you preempted my follow-up question as you speak about engaging communities. I was going to ask you, what does meaningful participation look like? But like I'm hearing you say, is that it's actually rooted in deep awareness first and foremost, and then of course the accessibility, the access to some of those resources that we speak about. There's a very interesting question that's come from Ramsey in the chat, and Adrian, I'm going to throw it at you before I bring the question that I'd love to share for you to share with us around some of the big lessons you've learned. But I thought this was quite interesting. The question that Ramsey is raising is, here it is, I'm just pulling it up in a second. The questions are coming thick and fast. Ramsey Beck says, can the experts please answer, to what extent does tracking financial flows help with detecting and prosecuting trafficking? And I thought that was a great question, because we know that financial flows, and especially illicit financial flows, oftentimes are a guise or a shadow or a curtain of something deeper. What can you offer us, Adrian, just in response to that question? And then I'll come back with the question planned.
I think that's a really great question, because that is such a key component to being successful in combating, especially human trafficking, and especially when it relates to cybercrime. As we were talking about earlier, sort of the international and the global interrelationship of these types of offenders. Historically, oftentimes we've tended to look at things that are just happening in our jurisdictions. You know, a very common example in the United States would be sort of attacking single point locations of illegal commercial sexual activity, right? We close down that shop, high five ourselves, go home. We've done a good thing. But that's just the head of the hydra. And when you cut off the head of the hydra, right, there are 8 more that grow back in its place. Utilizing the financial tracking, seeing where the money goes, because that location that you have shut down, that location that became the entry point for your investigation, will lead you to other locations where individuals are being trafficked, will lead you to other locations where people are being abused, and more importantly, will lead you to the wealth that has been built on their backs. And in order to really stop the abuse, what you have to do is make it financially unsound to be involved in this business, to make it hurt. If you shut down a location, they'll just find a lease or a building or a home somewhere else to begin practicing out of again. You've stopped it for a moment. But when you make it hurt financially, that's when you really begin to make a difference in crippling or bringing these rings and these organizations to an end. So following those finances, which sometimes involves cryptocurrency, but quite frankly, more often involves the use of just everyday monetary transactions. Following those money trails and following them to the properties that aren't being used for illegal purposes and confiscating and seizing those properties, finding the cars, all of the other things are how you really make the difference in these trafficking organizations. So I think that money piece is so critical.
To what Adrian's talking about too is you following that money to like have a direct impact. If you shut down a shop, are you providing the aftercare that you need to the victims? Are they just going to go right back to it? All they're doing is just being moved somewhere else. Yeah. And so it's not super helpful. But a lot of what we're seeing is, yes, we're seeing the crypto side, right? And tracking the cryptocurrency wallets and where that money goes. But we're also seeing a lot of transactions and trends through things like Cash App, which is a banking software that's used here. Venmo's huge. And what it is, if you're not familiar, is you connect your bank account and you can just trade money back and forth to other people, basically mobily. I'm sure you guys have something similar out there in
M-Pesa. Yeah, M-Pesa in Kenya and e-wallet in South Africa.
Yep. So it's all the same things that we're seeing. But what we're also seeing here is that these organizations are building in software and monitoring tools to look for trends in human trafficking and in underage exploitation and stuff like that. And they're making reports to us, which is also super helpful.
Matt, thank you very much for adding that, because I was going to skip this, but now I can't. There's a question from Matthew. What is the one manual task you wish you could be automated or optimized to help you catch perpetrators faster? Now, Matt, I'm going to ask you just to sit and marinate on that, because I'm going to come back to you on that. I want to go back to Adrian, because Adrian, I was bringing a question to you to say, given your evidently deep expertise, having worked on GBV and human trafficking cases that have crossed international borders, if you could distill all of that experience to 3 biggest lessons or most impactful lessons that the experience has taught you, that you feel, if nothing else, this has got to get out to the world, what would those 3 lessons be?
I think the first and most important lesson is the lesson of collaboration. Any investigation in the US involves a ridiculous number of borders, right? Not just our transnational borders, but our local borders, our state borders. Within my own jurisdiction, we have, I believe it's 9 different law enforcement agencies that we're coordinating amongst in different jurisdictions within my jurisdiction. So the importance of collaboration, the importance of relationship building in advance. So I know, okay, I have an investigation with a connection to Mexico. I have an investigation with a connection to China. Who do I know who can help me get in contact with individuals within those countries, or who can help me extradite individuals from those countries if that's necessary, if that's something that I need to do. Yeah. So the concept of learning to collaborate, learning to work together, which I think we're hearing from all of our panelists here today. Another important lesson is the lesson of patience, sort of in the vein of what I was talking about earlier of, you can go in and you can close down this location today. Today I could walk out the door right this second. We have investigations going on. I could walk out the door right this second, close down a location. But if I do that, I lose out on the bigger organization. So having that patience and recognizing that as much as I want to ride in on my white horse now and protect these individuals that I can see are being victimized, if I can just wait a little bit longer, I can perhaps help more individuals who are being victimized. Knowing that you don't know what you don't know. Always being willing to learn, always being willing to participate in panels like these, right? Because I'm learning from my fellow panelists. I'm learning from the folks in the chat that's appearing on the side of my screen. All of this information, I'm learning where people are doing well, questions people have, where we're all falling down, and that helps us come together and really build a better system. So always being willing to learn and change and evolve, and never being stuck with this is how we've always done it, because this environment evolves so quickly that this is how we've always done it is not going to fix the problem.
Learning to collaborate, patience to see the bigger picture, and of course, knowing that you don't know what you don't know. I think it's a great place to launch the poll, because the question that's going to come up for all of us now is, how important can international collaboration like the SA-USA partnership today, and I would say Kenya as well, SA-USA-Kenya partnership today, how important are those in solving a local crime? I am very glad to see that we are at 0% at not very important and 93% at critical, but also 7% saying, yes, it's important, but local focus must come first. And I think therein is an invitation in this conversation as well to say, how do we strike the balance so that the citizenry also feel that there is sufficient focus on what's happening locally, but not losing the coordinated cross-border nature of a lot of these crimes. Now, Matt, I'd thrown a quick question at you from Matthew. I'd love to hear what's your popcorn response to that. If you could optimize one thing that would let you catch perpetrators faster, what would that be?
It's a lot of what we're doing. We've streamlined. We have really good tools. The thing that is probably the slowest is just like Adrian mentioned, is that investigative piece, is the time it takes, the manualness of sitting on houses and watching people come and go, the intel gathering of not just through the internet, that's fine. It's the investigative piece of out in the field and trying to develop that to build your case. The automated side of things is maybe taking a large bulk of video and establishing pattern of life automated. That'd be amazing to get an idea for that.
I'm keen to get us towards landing this airplane together as we now move towards some future focus questions for all of us as we begin to come towards the tail end of our conversation. I'm interested in, what are you taking away from this conversation? I'm interested in hearing what you think the concrete next steps should be for prosecutors and law enforcement that can be taken globally and together. Because I think if there's one thing that's come through in this conversation has been the opportunity to work more collaboratively, to work more across borders. So let me maybe start off with you, Vuyo. What are you taking away? What do you think the next steps should be? And what do you think is possible that we could do globally and together?
My three key takeaways that stood out from this discussion is that, firstly, cybercrime is increasingly enabling crimes such as GBV, gender-based violence, human trafficking, making digital platforms, a critical space for prevention and enforcement. And secondly, transnational crimes networks operate across borders. And that means that no single country or institution can address these threats alone. We need each other. And thirdly, which is lastly, effective responses, require strong partnerships between prosecutors, law enforcement agencies, the private sector, and communities as well. So for me, those are my three takeaways from this discussion.
That is absolutely fantastic, Vuyo. Thank you very much for reinforcing some of the very, very big points that have been made in this conversation. Eva, if you were to land it at your takeaways and what you potentially see as the next steps, what would you put on the table?
My takeaways, again, are also three. GBV, cybercrime, and human trafficking, they are interconnected. They can start online and they can end offline. So they can start online, but the abuse can escalate physical. Yeah. Then my second takeaway is that victims are increasingly vulnerable. I'm talking of women, I'm talking of the youth, and I'm even talking of the migrants. So victims are extremely vulnerable because they are exposed to technology. They are easily accessible. And then thirdly, I'm seeing with the involvement of cybercrime, evidence is primarily digital. Now, what are the next steps that we can take? Just as Adrian had put it so well, collaboration. Strengthen cross-border cooperation in terms of joint investigations, in terms of MLAs, in terms of sharing of intelligence. What other things can we do together? Build digital forensic capacity. We strengthen, we prevent through public awareness. This is a campaign that should go to all the borders. And of course, we've seen that money plays a very critical role. Let us follow the money.
Let us follow the money.
Let's follow the money.
And of course, that point on digital forensic capacity just being so super important. Adrian, what would you land on this table as your final thoughts?
It's very interconnected with what we've already heard. When we talk about building digital forensic capacity, we're talking about money, we're talking about resources, and how do we get our governments to fund this work? And that's where I look at this broad group of individuals that we have that are joining us here today. Over 100 participants at one point in time, I looked that we had from broad cross sections of our communities, the medical field, social justice, the legal field, prosecutors, of course. These are individuals who are not just people who are involved in and interested in this particular work, but these are individuals who are citizens who have voices, who can amplify this message to your legislators, to your governments, to say this is something we need to focus on and we need to fund and we need to put the money into this because it is going to make a real difference in the lives of our citizens as well as in terms of how our world functions. I also think that this group of folks that we have, all of these participants, we talk often from the perspective of law enforcement of, proactive investigation or reactive prosecution. But what are we doing as a community to address these issues beyond just awareness? Because when we talk about the intersection of gender-based violence, and human trafficking. What we know is that the vast number of women who find themselves in situations where they're being trafficked for the purposes of sexual servitude often find themselves in that situation. Their conduit into trafficking is through an intimate partner and through the influence of domestic violence and domestic abuse. So what are we doing to combat gender-based violence and domestic violence in our communities, not just from a law enforcement and prosecutorial perspective, but in our communities? And sometimes that seems really big, but I would bet that many of the individuals who have joined us today are parents. What are we teaching our sons about how they interact with the women in their lives? What are we teaching our daughters about what they should expect for themselves and demand for themselves in terms of their relationships? So these are things that we can each of us tackle in our own individual lives, but then use our collective voices to work together to find funding, and then work together collectively, collaboratively, both in law enforcement and investigation, but also in collaborative multidisciplinary teams, so that as I'm prosecuting a case, there's a resource that I can steer my survivor towards to help them heal and progress and really escape this particular life. So I think it's that collaboration and that individual responsibility and capability that could be a big takeaway from this particular presentation.
Adrienne, I love that you brought in culture into this, because I think what happens in our communities is a reflection of the cultures that we protect and nurture and we enable. And the extent to which we're able to strip out some behaviors is just a reflection of the cultures we're willing to confront. So thank you for raising that. And of course, highlighting the multidisciplinary nature of the collaboration that's been called for. Money, money, money has also been a big theme, and funding will determine the strength of institutions, the strength of response, the strength of support that becomes available. Matt, let me bring you into this conversation as well as we start beginning to wrap now. The takeaway and the possibility of what you think can be done together.
Well, I think we've seen through this group how much collaboration there has to be, right? Money is one aspect, but this collaboration side is, I might have the money, but somebody else might have other resources. And collaborating together, we're able to do this. And I think something that we forget about in the law enforcement side is how important some of these NGOs and nonprofits are in the aftercare of our victims. A lot of times they get caught up in the court process and we're not able to give them all the resources they need, or we're focused on our track. I know I do the digital forensics. I get the evidence. I present that to the investigator, or maybe I am the investigator. I present that to Adrienne. Adrienne then takes that and she's off to the races. And sometimes those victims get forgot about. And they need that aftercare, and they need that rehab, the rehabilitation into not this servitude, not being a victim, and taking back their identity and becoming, not a victim, and becoming somebody, that can keep their head raised high and be proud of the things that they've been able to overcome. My big takeaway is just the collaboration side of things, is we need to be working together so much more than we already are. And maybe you'll never have a case in Colorado, but now you have two resources that you can tap into for information, for assistance, ideas, just to bounce an idea off somebody. And that's all it does. And it's just creating that culture where that's okay to talk about it. One of the things I love that Adrienne talked about was like the proactive things that anybody can do. I mean, our airport in the bathroom tapes up signs that are basically, if you here's some examples of what human trafficking looks like. If you see this, call this number. I do a lot of presentations in schools, and we talk about sharing nude photos or explicit pictures with each other. And we have this video where it shows the life cycle of how this photo just grows and is shared and becomes exploitation, right? And I ask every time, and Adrienne kind of mentioned this, is how could this not have happened? And the answer from everybody is, well, she didn't have to take the picture. That's the wrong thing. That's the wrong answer. The guy didn't have to ask for the picture. That's where we need to start with. We need to start what's acceptable. How can we make our men, our young men, and the people in our society know what the right thing is to do, what's appropriate and what's not appropriate.
No.
And not asking for that picture originally is the right answer to that.
Matt, I think that's just it brings it home so clearly for all of us who are or either parents or others, children themselves, others are guardians, and so on and so on. You bring it home with that practical example, it really lands. But I think again, the biggest thing has been collaboration, and more collaboration. One of the beautiful things we've been able to do in this conversation is take questions and reference questions throughout and weave them in. So at least we're not feeling stuck as if we haven't had a chance to address some of the Q&A. What I'd love to do in this final opportunity for you to speak is write Kim's job description. She's going to kill me for this, but I think that's the best way to end, is to say, what can PAJI do? Right? We've spoken about a lot of possibilities around what we'd like to see, but what do you think would really make for an effective, organization that is launching officially here today? How do we make sure that PAJI really is an organization that makes a difference? If you could reduce it to one line, I want you to think about it as like a billboard and say PAJI could, and complete the sentence. What's the one big difference PAJI could make given the plethora of challenges that we've spoken about, but also the imminent opportunities if we collaborate together? So Eva, I'm going to give you a chance to go first. This is the first line of PAJI's expanded mission and Kim's job description.
This is my sentence. That's my line.
Yeah.
PAJI can, if possible, they can assist with development of standard operating procedures for this.
The development of standard operating procedures, so that when we are working collaboratively, we're speaking the same language, measuring the same things, and aligned. I think, Eva, that's fantastic. Let me go to Matt next. I'm going to mix it up a little bit. Matt, what are you putting on Kim's job description?
I'm putting on educator.
So PAJI could become an educator, raising the consciousness and awareness of a range of the issues that we've spoken about, I'm certain, Matt, to your point. Fabulous. Vuyo, can I get your response? What would you put on the PAJI mission flag to make sure that they become an organization that matters?
PAJI must be able to create platforms where prosecutors and investigators can exchange best practices, because what might work in South Africa might also work in Kenya, something like that. So that for
I love
me.
that. Thank you very much. Become a platform where we can exchange knowledge and best practice and good practice, so we deepen the knowledge base for all of us. Thank you very much. And I want to thank all of the claps and the high fives that are coming through. Adrian, what are you putting on this job description?
Everybody else really stole my answers. But I think what I would also say is I would love it if PAJI could advocate. If PAJI could find for itself a way to be the voice of this collaboration, or to at least assist others to find their voices, to advocate for the resources, to advocate for the education, to advocate for the connection that we've all sort of recognized as so important here today.
I think that's absolutely fantastic. So there is a role to play in advocacy, to be the voice that unlocks resources, that enables education, and that actually enables collaboration. Thank you very much. As I'll call on Kim to come and just give us her vote of thanks, let me just summarize for me what has stood out. And I've actually reduced this to 5 C's. What I've heard is collaboration, community. I've heard cash, which was follow the money. I've heard coordination, and that is because the crimes are coordinated across borders, we need coordinated responses. And I've heard culture, that in fact, it starts with confronting our own culture first. So I want to say a very big thank you to our panelists representing the US, South Africa, and Kenya. I do want to remind all of us that the course catalog is up on the website, on the PAJI website. I want to remind you once again around the social media It's at Pan-African Justice Initiative across all our platforms. And today's hashtag is Pan-African Justice. Of course, if you do have any inquiries about the courses or you'd like to inquire about becoming a donor or a partner to PAJI, please email us at paji@renaissance-ss.com.
Well, greetings everyone again from me as Executive Director of PAJI. Thank you all for making me relevant and increasing my job description. I love it. All of you, thank you for your presence, your participation, your engagement. I get to do the fun stuff, which is to express gratitude. And first, I'd like to express my appreciation to the founders of PAJI based in the US, Kenya, Malawi, and Ghana, and to the PAJI directors, advisors, and the interns in South Africa and Canada. Their support made this webinar to launch PAJI possible. Thank you. We mentioned cash earlier. Funding makes events like this possible. Our major funders are individuals who donated on the PAJI Back-A-Buddy page and MultiChoice. So thank you to everyone who donated on Back-A-Buddy, and I'd also like to thank MultiChoice. And to our panelists for bringing the content and the substance. Your time, your effort, your contribution is seen and appreciated. Adrian Van Nice, Chief Trial Deputy Office of the District Attorney, Boulder County, Colorado, and Supervisor of the Sexual Assault Unit. Matt Beers, Certified Digital Forensic Examiner, Office of the District Attorney, Boulder County, Colorado. And from Kenya, Eva Maboya, Superintendent of Police, Head of the Anti-Human Trafficking and Child Protection Unit in the Directorate of Criminal Investigation in Mombasa. Asante Sana, my dear sister from East Africa. And from South Africa, Vuyo Kitelo, Senior State Advocate, Sexual Offenses and Community Affairs, National Prosecuting Authority of South Africa. Thank you all. And of course, Nosipa Shabalala for moderating today. You bring conversations alive and you make them the bases for action. Thank you, Nosy. As if I wasn't busy enough, I'm busier. I thank you so much.
Thank you so much,
And
Kim.
ultimately, our online delegates, members of the judiciary, the criminal justice sector, the legal fraternity, civil society, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues and friends, thank you for participating. The relevance of this webinar is clear. What was brought up, amongst others, how do we follow the money? How do we seize the assets? How do we disincentivize crime? PAJI is able to give courses on all of these things, and I think we need to engage about doing that very soon.
I think there's deep gratitude across the board. Of course, we weren't able to acknowledge every single person, but a truly global conversation across the board. Until next time, it's goodbye for now.